Hello and welcome back to Veteran Instincts. This week we are returning to the recent Firestorm Cup to bring you the top 8 match between Blizzard Squadron member, Canadian XTC team member, and newly crowned Cala Galaxies champion Andrew Oehler.
That's quite the title.
It's getting bigger by the day. It's good that we recorded now. And he is up against Tin Squadron Cup winner and Firestorm Squadron regular, local to us, Peter Lake. Hello, Peter.
Hi.
Andrew, why don't we just get right into it? Go to you. Tell us about your list.
All right. Well, this is the list that apparently broke the internet. It's essentially Rebel Mind Link from first edition. It's just Rebel token passing, token manipulation, the list. So we have Hera with thread tracers, because Hera makes this whole list work. Being able to pass tokens with perfect information is great. Garvin with S-foils. Kyle Katarn with Jyn Erso and Moldy Crow. Jyn Erso's another huge part of this list, and what takes it over the top, really. Two Tubes with Leia and Perceptive, and Pivot Wing. And so, speaking of Leia, I popped it first turn. And I'm doing a cheeky little setup here to essentially stall and make my opponent commit to a lane before I do. Being as my list isn't super maneuverable, I like to try to do this against certain lists to try to have more knowledge about the engagement. Even though I was pretty sure Peter is going to take this big open middle lane. But yeah, that's where I kind of do the stall engagement, and it lets me get out Moldy Crow on the first turn, so that's pretty cool.
Awesome. And yeah, I think probably most of the people watching will be aware of this list. For anyone who isn't, we will go through exactly how it works as it happens. But suffice it to say, it is brutal in its efficiency. Peter, over to you. Much more. Well, to be fair to Andrew, this was an individual list when he took it. It's becoming much less so, but maybe a bit more left field list from you, Peter. Talk us through it and tell us about sort of your hopes for the opening engagement. Is Andrew right in suggesting that you're going to be heading into the centre of the board?
Absolutely, yeah. So every single game of the tournament, I tried to have a similar rock placement with a large area, top right hand, if I could. So my list is built pretty much around the disciplined talent, which was brand new, only 1 point, massively undercosted. So we've got 6 of the lesser seen Onyx Squadron scouts. That's the TIE aggressor with the talent slot. All of them have disciplined and all of them have dorsal to give me that 180 arc. And then pretty much with the remaining points that I've got, I've added a couple of thread tracers and as many ion missiles as I can within that 200 points. So we've got 2 with thread tracers and then 5 with ion missiles. So we've got 1 with the solitary thread tracer, yellow, and the rest have ion missiles, and red is double packing because he's got ion missiles and thread tracers. And this opening engagement, my initial thought was to try and spread them out a bit because the aggressors are more maneuverable if you do have them a little bit spread out. I could have hard two'd to the left and then come down towards the bottom of the screen, but I decided to go towards that large open area on the top left-hand corner.
Nice. And just to spell it out for us, Peter, because it's so pivotal to your list, could you just read Discipline for us so that all of the viewers are aware of exactly how it works and what might happen?
Absolutely. So Disciplined is a new talent. It's come out in the Vice Strike pack. And Disciplined says, after another friendly ship at range 0 to 3 is destroyed, if that ship is limited or has the Disciplined upgrade, you may perform a lock or barrel roll action. And that helps with some of the action economy within the list, but also it can help to trigger those ion missiles.
Absolutely. So you're going to roll in. Doesn't necessarily matter if you get range to take the target locks. Take those focuses, and then if something were to die, then all of a sudden all of its mates have their locks for the mods, and as you say, to be able to get those iron missiles off. Very nice.
Absolutely. And it's a fail-safe against the thread tracers as well, because the ones with thread tracers do tend to be the biggest target for opponents. So if they double down and they do manage to kill one, then that's negated by the fact that everyone else can get a lock if I'm within range.
Yeah, and I really liked the way even that you described the list, and it was really interesting that you talked about the build, you talked about the fact that you kind of put thread tracers on their 2 copies first and then fit in as many iron missiles. And I know Lloyd, that's something we really agree with in terms of thread tracers. You really need those 2 copies.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, built-in redundancy, right? The fact that you can have them there and it is something your opponent needs to be thinking of and playing around the whole time, then regardless of whether or not they fire, regardless of whether or not they hit, you still have that discipline trigger to potentially give you locks anyway in the engagement phase. It's a very kind of interesting toolboxing list, and it is constantly asking your opponent questions and causing them problems. On that note, Andrew, looking at this list across the table from you, you have 6 very nearly identical ships. Do you have an idea of wanting to take the thread tracers off first, or what sort of engagement are you looking at?
In a perfect world, I get an engagement with just a couple of them at range 3, and I get at least Garvin and Benthic to shoot at 1. And then having, all my defensive tokens, so I can hopefully trade at least a couple points of damage for nothing. Ideally red, because he's in the front and has all of the upgrades. But, against this list, it's kind of more of a target of opportunity as opposed to a specific target.
And how wary were you of the iron missiles? I see you turning in here. Are you sort of wary of board edges in this game?
I wasn't worried about getting ionized off the board. I was a little wary about them. The 1 damage at a time, though, I don't care about as much as I think anything else. But the 3 dice does get around some of my shenanigans. Mm-hmm. So, you have to respect it. I would rather take, the primaries at range 3. The ions are scary for sure.
So you mentioned your shenanigans and the importance of those 3 dice. Peter, obviously without knowing your build, has brought probably what I consider to be about as good a counter as you could bring versus your list, Andrew. Talk us through exactly what your list can do, and then maybe a little bit on why Peter's list might get around that.
Well, my list is essentially, if I want it to be, it's token flexibility at the end of the day, but it is, it's essentially 2 evades the list. Every time I'm defending, if I want, I have the option to give pretty much any ship 2 evades, even if they double blank. Due to Hera having a bunch of tokens, preferably just kind of sitting in the back with a big token stack on her that she can give up to anybody, and most of my guys in the front line having at least a token of some variety, right?
Yeah, and so to spell that out for the viewers, Hera's newly errated ability is that she can, during the dice modification step, pass a token to a friendly ship that is attacking or defending. So the nice thing about that is you've rolled your dice, you know whether they need a focus, whether they need evade. In this build, Benthic can give her a focus after he takes one, and then Kyle can pass her a focus at the start of the engagement phase, and she can take her own focus or evade, which leaves her with 3 tokens, all of which can be passed to whichever ship is shooting or defending, and all of which can become an evade in the process due to Jyn Erso. Absolutely, as you say, I was watching you for multiple games over the weekend trying to get a competitive one recorded, and my advice to Lloyd and other squad mates who were still in the competition was that if they faced you, they needed to be at range 1, because if they weren't rolling more attack dice than you were rolling evades, they were not going to do damage.
Exactly. If you can outmuscle me with attack dice, that's one way to counter it. The ions are solid. We'll see. I may have underestimated the ions, but the big thing though that I find is damage specifically, right? Like you need the dice, but if you can consistently pump in 2 to 3 to 4 damage a turn, my list will melt.
Yeah, which makes it quite tricky, doesn't it? Because it's, on the one hand, a little bit kind of depends what list you've brought, right? I hate people referring to kind of winning in the list building stage, but there are lists, I think, that would really struggle to get damage through on this.
Absolutely.
However, what I would say for your list is it is for not particularly maneuverable ships who need to be relatively close together to work. So this is a solid list. It's a good list. It's quite a forgivable list, but it is not a list that a bad player will win a tournament with, in my opinion.
It is awkward to fly, and they are not maneuverable ships. So you do have to have a lot of forethought with your maneuvers and be very careful in the approach. So I was talking about my stall tactic, but I didn't actually do it here. I gave myself the option to by stopping both of the Ewing and the Hawk, but I actually one-straighted Garvin. And that was just because I wasn't sure where Peter was going to commit, if he was going to come right down the middle, or if he was going to too hard like he was talking about right off the start. And you will see that once he committed to the middle, instead of stopping the second turn like I do sometimes, I kind of blitzed up the side. And I've just fanned my guys out. He's going to inevitably tag one, so I'm going to try to have him pick one of my ships and not all 4 of them.
Yeah, and so we can see we've just sort of crept into the opening engagement, kind of a little bit of a false opening engagement. Range 3 shots traded. Garvin putting 2 hits into the red Onyx Squadron, but the red Onyx Squadron opening up with 3 natural evades, so not bad. These engagements I think are interesting. I think it's easy to get tempted to kind of boost in to get that opening range 1 shot in the hope you'll get 1 or 2 damage on, but I see a lot of players sacrificing position for an attack that really is going to do 1 damage that probably isn't important. Here, I think you're both in a decent position, so I don't think that has happened. The initiatives are interesting in that Andrew has the I6 and the I4, who could potentially initiative kill one of these aggressors, but aren't likely to do so. They're not likely to put in 5 damage on their own. So maybe here, if you can get a couple through onto red, that might put it into a position where it's killable next turn, but not looking likely so far. So 2 dice shot into a focus evaded U-wing there, never likely to do damage, and indeed doesn't do damage.
And so you'll see I did kind of engineer close to the engage I was looking for. Ideally, Kyle would be here as well. Kyle is off hanging a little far back to the right, but I had 2 ships on 1 ship, and I stuck in 1 damage, which I mean is lower than I was hoping for, but with the engage and the way it is, it's not unexpected. So.
And it's an engage that is 0 risk for you, right? You have a single 2 die ship shooting back at you with the ability to pass evades to it.
Exactly. The real problem that I'm worried about at this point is now Peter's whole list converges on the 1 lane here. So
it's almost exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Like you got that nice opening engagement, and had you put in 1, maybe 2 more damage, then there's a decent chance that you can kill red before it shoots. Now, obviously, with disciplined, there's downside to that, but taking things off the board before they shoot you is never a terrible idea. But that 1 damage probably isn't enough that Garvin and Hera are going to be able to take it down. So yeah, I agree with you entirely, Andrew. Now you're looking in a position where it's a little bit scary. How fast is the U-wing? Is there an option for blocks here?
So essentially what I'm considering with U-wing here is I could 3-bank or 4 straight and go right in there for the engage, right? To potentially block his 3 banks or his 4 straight. So I think the 3-bank with the U-wing bumps the first 2, potentially, maybe only 1. But the problem with me doing that isn't that it's a good position for bumping, it's that I am separating Benthic further from Kyle, who has limited options this turn. And it means Hera has to kind of go in there pretty deep as well. And so I'm debating between that or, the Rebel 1 forward and just kind of taking the brunt of it. It'll be Benthic or Garvin. Now they will have all the tokens in the known universe accessible to them. But I do have to decide if I want to try to go for the block and then take a bunch of range 1 shots or have more consistent tokens, but kind of be at the back here.
And Peter, from you, what sort of engage are you looking at? Do you feel more comfortable trading range 1 shots with these ships because you only have 2 die primaries, or would you rather be hanging back and having the potential to get more agility on defense? What's your sort of feel coming into this?
I need to make sure that I'm moving in because I need the guys at the back to have range. I would have done the 3 hard in the previous turn, but I was actually trying to stay out of range 3. Obviously, just failed to do that with red. But positionally, where I am, if you look at where my turrets are, I need to be turning that way to make sure that I've got that 180 coverage in the right area.
Yeah, I think it's a list that has a huge threat area, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Andrew, from you, I'd be interested to see what you've chosen to do with Kyle here, because knowing now as I do the list a little bit better, and how valuable Kyle and perhaps more so Jin is to the list.
That's why Kyle is where he is, right? Kyle is a little out of it, but that's because I really wanted to protect him. Not that I want Benthic to eat all the damage, but Benthic is the one that I would rather him shoot at, Benthic or Garvin, but I don't think with Peter's position. And the caliber of player is that he will shoot at Garvin first. And honestly, a lot of the play in this list actually revolves around where Benthic is positioned.
Yeah, there was a boost, I think, 2 turns ago from Kyle that we didn't talk over. We were still discussing lists, but I think it was key, right, to putting Kyle in a position where he is fairly safe with that gas cloud between the lists, and it just gives him flexibility.
Yeah, and we see coming into the kind of engagement proper here, I completely understand what you're saying, Andrew, about not stringing them out too much, and a really interesting point about not wanting to have to get Hera too close, and I think that's something that maybe I wouldn't have considered.
If Hera dies, I lose. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely, and I think that probably makes the difference where I'm thinking, the 3-bank, get a block, they'll bump into each other, it'll be great. But as you say, getting Hera into a risky position to make that happen is not fantastic. And obviously with Benthic, you need him to be relatively close to Hera when he's taking his action if you want to get the full efficiency out of the list. So we're coming into the opening engagement here. We've got Hera into the red Onyx Squadron, firing her first set of thread tracers. 3 hits, spends the focus there for the 3 hits. I think that's wise. That's definitely going through. And so that is target locks for everybody onto red, who's looking at risk already. Because the thread tracers don't do damage, not likely to die to Garvin. Almost impossible, given that it's going to be 3 dice into 2.
Pretty much guarantees he dies this turn, though.
Absolutely. He's going to take an awful lot of fire from those 3 ships. Straight into the Garvin shot here, range 2. Firing at red, obviously, because he's got the target lock. Does not need it. So first ludicrous interaction of the game. Hera passes a focus to Garvin. Garvin spends that focus and passes it straight back to Hera. And this is what people talk about with a kind of infinite focus loop. So 3 hits from Garvin. Oh, nice opening 2 evades. Only taking 1 on the Onyx Squadron. Definitely helpful. So last shot before the Onyx Squadron start firing is the Hawk. This is at I3, so even if it kills, they will still all get to fire. And nice, using the target lock for hit crit. Spending the focus, not ideal, but not a great problem. Another nice set of evades there, but the crit sneaking through. And I believe that is a console fire. We're about to see go on there. And Peter, over to you as you start to take your shots here. Andrew mentioned that you probably wouldn't shoot at Garvin first. There's a very good reason for that. Seeing this list for the first time as you are, were you aware of that? And what was your thought in terms of target priority here?
So I wasn't aware of the Garvin infinite focus loop, and what the camera's not picking up is kind of the look of pure horror as Garvin spends, in quotation marks, a focus and hands it straight back to Hera, and I go, oh, great, okay. Really, at this point, I'm thinking about Benthic because it has Leia, so actually has a lot of utility when it comes to being unpredictable. And that perceptive co-pilot is so important. So really, I'm thinking, okay, can I try and get Benthic? Because the other thing as well, great blocker. At Initiative 2 moves before me or stops before me if he wants to, and could just sit there and rotate.
Yeah, I think that's really clear thinking. I think that having seen it on attack, then being able to instantaneously decide that shooting Garvin on defense and him having a focus every single time is a bad idea is certainly important to you staying in this match. I think had you wasted all your shots here into Garvin, this would have been a very bad start to the game.
Be a very quick match.
So we might have to talk about that interaction that just happened there. So I double blanked on Benthic on his thread tracer, and I still dodged the shot. This is the other shock and awe, I think, revelation a lot of people have about the Hera Jin combo. So Hera had 2 focuses, passed 1 to Benthic, turned it into an evade token with Jin, because Jin just matters when the token is transferred, and then Benthic had an evade token out of thin air.
Yeah, absolutely. And going through the overlay myself, I sort of almost went through the same thing as Peter. I was like, oh, only 1 hit, that's really disappointing. Oh, it's gone through. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, it hasn't.
However, this thread tracers does hit. Nothing I could do about the 3 hits. So there wasn't any point in spending tokens because threads hit. So
Absolutely. So it's taken 2 of the shots of the list, but we do have a nice scary set of 6 target locks there sat on the U-wing. And 4 shots yet to go. And importantly, 4 shots that are now 3 dice shots with no range bonus. And as previously discussed, having the ability to overwhelm those defense dice suddenly means that Peter's damage output has gone up massively. So who needs mods? First shot goes in, hit crit. Only 1 evades.
And I believe I just decide to eat the ion here.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1 ion token, 1 damage. Second of the 4 ion torpedoes coming in here. The other thing that thread tracer hit does is sort of remove any doubt about the target priority here. There's no need to shoot anything other than all of your ion torps at the U-wing. We'll talk a little bit more about target priority against your list, Andrew, after this round of shooting. So green firing an ion missile here. Also 3 hits, another 1 damage, but on this occasion you do get enough paint to avoid the ion token. That feels pretty important. You don't want this U-wing ionized and drifting towards everything. Oh, more good dice. Nice. Always the way, isn't it? You've got double mods, you never need them. Do decide to spend at this point, and I think that's sensible. Only 1 more shot coming in.
Try to dodge the ion if at all possible here.
Yeah. I think even though the 1 straight is not the world's worst maneuver for you, Peter having to think about what maneuver you're setting is definitely valuable, and him knowing that that one straight is coming is quite something. So that, I think, is a very good decision. Oh, but it might not pay off. Ooh, another 3 hits, but 2 focuses, just enough to avoid the ionization. But not bad. Certainly, as I said, I watched a fair few games against this list over the weekend, and I never saw someone do this much damage in the first round. So very nice start. Ewing's still there, though. Has a range 1 shot against a 2 health Onyx Squadron. Has that target lock. So crit and 3 blanks.
Spending the lock here is almost inconsequential, because if Benthic needs it next turn, I have Hera's lock.
Absolutely. Wowzers. I hadn't even thought of that. But doesn't have the focus. So just the 2 crits. Do need to see some paint here. Get it. 1 crit goes through. And it was a weapons failure, not a direct hit. So that Onyx Squadron lives to fight another day.
Yeah, and I was very disappointed actually that he that he lived here, and he got lucky in that he didn't have to spend any of his locks, which was also a huge deal.
It's worth noting that had he died, I could have still used Disciplined, because Disciplined is a lock action, whereas Thread Tracers is to gain a lock. So you can actually use both in the same round.
So yeah, that's actually a good point. You would have had the 6 locks regardless. Well, I guess 5 locks in that case. But yeah, I was hoping to get one off the board here.
We get our first slight game state mistake here in that, although it's not up on the overlay, the first crit taken was a console fire, and Red didn't roll for it when he engaged. And obviously, with him sitting there on 1 health, that could have made a difference. But as we said last week, and it's something that Lloyd and I really believe, is that this happens in every game of X-Wing. If you think you play a perfect game of X-Wing, believe me, you do not. You'll know from watching the channel, from watching games online, these things happen. But just to kind of clear it up, it was spotted doing the overlay, but not live during the game, and that very much is what it is. To gloss over that, and Andrew, to jump back to the target priority, we've got Peter making a sensible decision here. Obviously, he only really has a choice of 2 ships to shoot at. I think Hera at that range wasn't sensible, and beautifully explained that, particularly for his list, having that I2 around was a problem. If we wind back to the start of the game, and Peter could have gone for any of your ships, is there a ship to take out? Is there a key piece in this?
It's definitely Kyle, if you can. I think it's not a bad target to take up first, though. Do you get Leia off the table? He's big and beefy, and against Peter's list specifically, he does block his list, which is massive, right? But I think in 90% of games, if you can take anything out, you want to try to kill Kyle first. Getting Jyn Erso off the board and getting rid of just the token flexibility is massive to this list's survivability. And I mean, Kyle is not easy to kill, but he's not super maneuverable, and he is just a 5 hull or 5 health total chassis. So,
and sticking with Kyle, I thought his positioning last turn was decent from an offensive point of view, but looking at him now, I worry that the bank in is sort of perilously close to that gas cloud. What's your kind of thoughts with your list in terms of moves this round, and with Kyle in particular?
Well, so Benthic, I kind of don't want. Yeah, you'll see here. I didn't want a 1 straight because I didn't know if it would bump. I think I decided it would, and I did want the focuses here. And I think that this mucks up more of his list, as I believed he was going to be banking in or trying to shoot like straight over, kind of where Garvin is to use his dorsals. But this way, it still gets me a token. And if he does overshoot Benthic or bumps Benthic with a bunch of guys and Benthic can survive, then I can just pivot in on him with Leia.
And was Leia an option?
Leia stop was an option. I just didn't. If I can block even 1 ship, that's 1 less shot coming into Benthic, right?
That makes sense. And Peter, we see here that I for all the world thought you were going to be banking in as well. But that first ship has gone 1 straight. And if the rest of them are following suit, this is going to look pretty decent for you, I think. Why did you decide on the 1 straight in the end, Peter?
So it's all about the turret position. And I was worried about Garvin getting round the outside and him not being a viable target. So I'm trying to corral the list like a sheepdog, like trying to round them all towards the middle, and then that gives me the option to just circle them. Because ultimately, if I can do that, I am more maneuverable. I can get more time on target.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Like that, the one bank, although it's such a slight difference between one bank and the one straight, but it would have moved all your arcs into the center of the board. There'd have been a larger area out to this top left-hand corner that wasn't in danger, and you'd have given Garvin options to kind of slip past. And as it is, you've got a U-wing with no shots, Garvin bumped, and at least 5 double modded shots going into this U-wing. This looks pretty decent. Hera turning in here. I think the positive of Andrew's move is, as you say, is you did get those tokens, so you still got all of that defensiveness from last turn, and shows what I know. The one bank was fine by miles.
Yeah, I wasn't anticipating Peter going with the one straights. I was hoping he'd assume Benthic would just kind of one straight into his list, and that would have been more of a bump train. But I called him wrong, and Benthic's going to take some damage for this in return.
We see a second thread tracer going in here, I believe into pink.
Yes.
But very poor roll, decides not to spend the tokens, which you're going to need for defense in a moment. And we've got Garvin here, crucially bumped into the 1 health. And Garvin with, well, the Garvin never has no mods. Gets to spend the focus, pass it back. Hit crit. I cannot overstate how good that interaction is. It's incredible.
It essentially makes Garvin Luke Skywalker with unlimited force, right? Because he's the same as Luke now, but he has unlimited force opposed to just a max of 2.
For many less points.
Yes.
So yellow only taking a shield.
Oh, I think this is also where we realize about console fire.
So the console fire roll from Red Squadron this turn. A correction of last turn where Kyle shot inappropriately early. Now, as Peter is the first player, have the Onyxes firing first, starting with the red aggressor, who has a weapons failure. 2 dice because he's at range 1, and 2 hits into 2 nice natural evades from the U-wing. But there are many more shots to come. Pink shot next. Need a few more of these to be dodged. Oh, 3 hits is nice. Definitely 1 damage going through. Oh, and not a perfect roll. Spends both his own focus and the evade from Hera to take 1 damage. Down to 3 health.
And the evade from Hera here, because I don't think she will need it at this point.
Absolutely. But more dice coming in. Another range 1 shot from Brown here. Going to be touch and go for this U-wing, I think. Oh, not great. But crucially, has the lock from those thread tracers last turn. And those good natural rolls from those ion torpedoes are really going to pay dividends this round. All of these double modded shots. And does exactly that. From a poor roll into 3 hits. Another focus passed as an evade, but takes 2. Down to 1, and with 2 more shots coming in, looking a little bit unlikely that this U-wing sees it through the turn. And this is a very good opening for you here, Peter.
Yeah, at this point, I'm very happy with how that's gone, and also not actually needing to use that many of the locks that I acquired.
Absolutely, and you see exactly that here. Another hit crit.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this list can do, Andrew, that not many can, with 6 shots coming in, you can burn through that token stack, even with it being as big as it is.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a dead U-wing. And I believe we still have green to shoot. So green has a choice now. Having said that Garvin's a trap, Garvin is less of a trap when he's got no tokens to spend. Go with blue first. I think that's sensible. See what happens. We'll see whether we're tempted by the range 1 shot into the Hawk here or get the shot into Garvin. No locks, so no ion torps to worry about. But nice 2 hits nevertheless. 1 evade and a damage going through onto Garvin. That is a nice bonus prize. Oh, in fact, that was onto Hera. Wowzers.
Yeah.
That is a really nice little bonus there. Shipping a damage through onto Hera is rare in games that I've seen against this list. And yet more fire to come. So now we get down to the Hawk shot. Spending that target lock. Spending a focus for 3 hits. And that is the end of days for this red Onyx Squadron. But here's where we get our second little wrinkle of the game. I think there's a little bit of confusion initially from Peter about the target of the shot, and a damage is dealt onto yellow instead of onto red. That does get picked up later, and red is taken off the board, but the damage never comes off yellow. So yellow is down to 3 and remains so as the game goes on. And again, another just slight mistake there. But as we said, the reason I bring it up is for game state so the viewers understand why yellow has gone down to 3. Carl, not at all to criticise the players, because by this point, especially with lists as complicated as this, I would have made about 57 mistakes. So, Andrew, Ewing's gone down. We've got red about to be taken off the board, which is going to trigger a load of target locks for the rest of these Onyx squadrons. It doesn't feel like a great trade.
It is terrible.
And positionally, you're in a slightly tricky place in terms of not getting blocked. What's kind of running through your head at this point?
At this point, I realized that Peter will have control of the middle of the board for eternity. He can essentially just turn to his ship's left and just continue to control the entire middle of the board, right? So I'm trying to figure out, because at this point I am down by a lot, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that I can claw back a victory. I'm trying to do some points calculations and such. I'm going to essentially have to try to play the list completely different than I'm used to. As you are right, this is actually a pretty hard list to deal with my list, and Hera is getting locked here as well, right? So
Yeah.
that's also bad, and Hera is not in a great position to dodge many arcs. So I'm looking at options. I know we haven't gone to dials yet, but this turn is essentially I'm looking at options of like, well, do I have to disengage my entire list as much as I can, and probably not keep them together, right? Hera's bubble is range 2, so if we need that. But at this point, I think I'm more focused on just Hera surviving, because I might have to disengage the entire list to kind of re-engage and pick away at these things while I can take shots that are advantageous. The dorsals can't shoot at range 3, so being able to move after him and have some board knowledge, with the little repositioning I can do, might be the key to winning this game. Because if I fight him in the middle of the scrum, I will lose. I will not beat these aggressors at what they do best.
I like it. So we're on to kind of plan B. Your hyper-efficient jousting block has met its match, but you're accurately identifying there that you are moving second with repositional actions, and maybe this has just become an ace versus swarm game, and that sounds like a much more winnable prospect. Peter, over to you. This has obviously gone pretty well so far. The decision to lock Hera there, which I thought was really interesting and really good. Why did you go for Hera rather than either of the other two ships here?
I thought if I could swing my ships as they are now along that side, it basically gives Hera a gauntlet for her to try and fly down where there'll be multiple arcs. And if that's the case, hopefully I can catch her in some of those arcs.
Yeah, it does two things, doesn't it? As you say, it's hard for her this turn to get out. It removes any possibility of her being cute and one-harding and staying in the centre there. Maybe, not the greatest plan to start off with, but certainly not if she's target locked. And it starts to push her away from the rest of the list. And we can see that here, Andrew. It's very sensible getting out, but you do not want Hera flying away from the rest of your ships.
Yeah. So Kyle, I believe, tried a 3-bank. It ended up bumping, which isn't great because now Kyle's in a bunch of arcs. So I'm definitely panicked at this point. Garvin's 4K did clear because at this point I'm kind of treating Garvin as just the hammer, right? If he can just rip a couple of these things apart and keep the focus on the other ships, then maybe I can have a chance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's trying his best. A nice hit crit with the infinite focus spent there. This is into Pink, I believe, who takes the hit and the crit. I think that's very sensible. Garvin is the biggest gun and slightly more maneuverable. He's still almost as difficult to kill as he was when the Ewing was around. So it seems like a very sensible piece to be aggressive with. And he has put a damaged engine into this Onyx Squadron, and that's pretty relevant, seen as what looks like a pretty sensible game plan from Peter at this point is to just too hard forever, stay in the centre of the board. And that obviously becomes now not an option for Pink.
Damaged engine is pretty much the worst kind of first crit that these can get.
Absolutely. And we are now down to the Onyx Squadron's firing. They've got some options. Hera's managed to get out of, I think, all of the arcs here. As you say, the range restriction on that dorsal turret there, meaning that she can't be fired at even by green here. Does leave the Hawk in a slightly tricky spot. Has a focus from the previous round, but is in a lot of arcs and actually is bumped into blue there, isn't he? So at least it's not taking fire from blue. But poor opening shot. no damage done from the first of those dorsal turrets. The more of these that go away without damage being done, the better you're feeling about life, Andrew. You really need the Hawk to survive through this, and if you can stay above half points, that would be ideal. Better dice this time. Spends the focus. I think that's sensible with only one more shot coming in. And we get an evade. We get the focus spend there to avoid both damage.
I think I initially want to spend with Hera and then decide that it's actually better to spend with Kyle.
Because then it can become an evade, right?
It can become an evade, and when Kyle attacks, if he needs the focus and Hera still has it, even if he doesn't spend it, he can get it from Hera.
Yeah, perfect. But 2 hits here. No tokens left. Just the single focus.
I guess it didn't matter there, but yeah.
Would have been the same result even had the Hawk blanked out there. So just takes the 1 from that and the single range 1 shot remaining here. Hit crit. Nice. Gonna want to see some paint here. Oh, and a crucial evade, meaning that is just the second shield.
Yeah, I definitely got lucky on that engage, but yeah, and then get really unlucky here.
Oh, yeah, when you're feeling good about life and you think, oh, this might be going okay, and then your range 1 shot results in no damage. That is sad.
Well, it did resolve in 1 damage, yeah. But I got lucky with Kyle only taking 2 there. I guess it makes up a little bit on Peter's end for the triple painted to Benthic, but I mean, either way, I got off a little lucky there. Kyle could have been in big trouble.
Yeah, and as it is, remains above half, and crucially did not take that crit. And Hera in a much nicer spot. Kyle looks like he's probably got more options in terms of getting out of this sort of hell that is the middle of the board covered in dorsal turrets. And Garvin going in there, but as we previously discussed, Garvin is maybe the ship that is most able to do this, and you do need some ships shooting, Andrew, because you are currently 9 points down. Not a lot to make up, but do need to do some more damage.
Yeah, Kyle not getting halved meant that this became a lot more doable for me.
And as we said, coming into this round, you sort of are now in a bit more position to play an ace game. How much experience had you had playing against Discipline? Was this the first time or first tournament you'd seen it on the table?
No, coming into this, I had played against Disciplined a lot. This was actually one of the first non-interceptor Discipline lists I played against, however, and it did take me by surprise. Also, I haven't played against Aggressor Spout to this point, and so I think just the list in general took me by surprise.
Yeah, I think that's very much Peter's sort of approach to X-Wing, I suspect. Every time I've seen Peter put something on the table, it's called somebody else. So going back to now the potential ability to play the ace game, one way to deal with the Discipline Swarm is to go around and halve things rather than kill them. But that does leave a lot of arcs on the table. Is that something you'd be considering at this point, or is it just still too many guns to be continually dodging them?
It's hard, right? It's a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. The reality is Peter already has a bunch of locks out, and it does let him switch. If Kyle had killed Pink there, which was why I shot at Pink, he would have been able to move locks. However, it was after he was shooting. So that was the important part there. With Garvin, if Garvin had killed Pink, I mean, I would have killed Pink, but then it becomes a more interesting dilemma in this, specifically this turn, right? Where now Kyle probably dies because everything locks him. So it kind of depends on the situation, I think, but it definitely makes you make hard decisions.
And Peter, for you, we're 8 games, I think, into the tournament at this point. How many people did you feel in your games sort of had a plan for the aggressors? Or how many people really kind of inherently had a feel for how the list was going to work, did you find?
I think you're right about going down the route of trying to halve the ships. The people that had a plan, that's what they were doing. But the issue was I still had those 680-degree arcs on the board at that point. So I don't think people were prepared for it, but they definitely, in the back of their mind, had an idea of, okay, this is how I deal with Disciplined in itself.
I think both lists do that kind of thing of making your opponent make decisions. I mean, where possibly both options are bad, but whether you're constantly making you make decisions that might result in things going poorly for them. So for Andrew, it's, do you want to shoot at Garvin when he has infinite tokens? Do you want to shoot at anything that can have evade tokens all over the place, and how do you counter that? And I think it's the same for you, Peter. Like, yes, you can take ships off the board so that I have fewer arcs everywhere. But if you do that, then all the arcs I have are potentially double modded.
And so we see a bunch of sort of banks and hard turns coming in here from Peter, really occupying the centre of the board. I expect and hope that this hawk is heading into this top left-hand corner. If it isn't, it is about to have a bad day. Possibly top right-hand corner also not bad, but certainly doesn't want to be turning down towards the bottom of the board. And everyone taking a focus apart from Pink, who has a damaged engine, so wasn't able to. Little bump there, not ideal from Green, but still I think worth it for the position, which is quite nice. Does give Garvin a little bit of a space to roll into should he do the one straight forwards.
Said I had turned out to stay close to Hera mainly here with Kyle, give him some added protection. And the boost ended up fitting, which was nice, which let me push him into range 3 of a bunch of the aggressors, which means that they cannot shoot me at that dorsal. So
yeah, I think it's really interesting to note that at this stage, all of your ships have the ability to boost, which feels pretty significant, right, when you're controlling ranges and keeping out of range of dorsal turrets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really interesting point to stop. And Peter, watching the game, I thought your positioning was excellent. There were a lot of turns I'd have done something different, but they were always worse than what you picked. This is the first turn I thought I may have done something which might be better, and I wanted to talk through it and see what your thoughts on it were and whether it was something you considered. So we got the hard turns from yellow, green, and brown, and they all look nice and they're occupying the centre of the board, giving Garvin a hard time. But I was less certain as to whether the hard turns with pink and blue were nice. With blue, we can see it's a little bit far, and he's not going to get a shot this round. But more so than that, I think what they really want to do next turn is hard turn again. Now, pink's not going to be able to because it's stressed, and blue, it's going to put him awkwardly on the wrong side of that gas cloud. And I wonder if you had K-turned them both, so they were sitting here, their arcs would be facing back into the centre. They potentially get shots on Garvin this round, and it seems to give them a nicer kind of run back into the centre for next round. With Pink especially, I think that's good because he's going to end up stressed whatever he does. And with Blue, it just kind of puts it into a better position for sort of staying in the game. Is that something you'd considered? And if so, what do you think about that as an option?
It was something that I considered. I considered K-turns with a couple of the others as well. The issue is I didn't want them to be stressed because the worst thing you can have is to K-turn your whole squad. One of them dies, and that discipline trigger doesn't apply because it's an action that none of your ships can take.
Absolutely. And the guys who K-turned would not be getting those iron torps off because it is an action, and if they're stressed, they cannot do it. Yeah, that changes things slightly. I think I still prefer the positioning, maybe enough to have done it, but that makes a lot of sense in terms of the decision making.
Looking back on it, I think that would have been a better position for those two ships than where they currently are. You're completely right. The Bacon gas cloud, at this point, it's hindering the maneuver for both pink and blue. And that's going to make it a little bit difficult to come around. And if I do get shots, they'll be obstructed. And 2 dice dorsal shots through gas clouds don't do anything.
Absolutely. And obviously we always say, but it is easy to think about these things when you're watching the game for a second time through, doing the overlay, having a cup of tea with no pressure on you. And the reason I highlight that is not to criticize Peter. It's mainly just to kind of highlight how those small decisions, thinking about 2-3 turns further on, can make a big difference. And so I wonder, going into the rest of this game, whether pink and blue are going to be able to kind of rectify their position, or whether that choice to hard turn is going to cost them in the next 2 to 3 turns. But as it is, still far from a terrible position. Blue not firing, but everything else has shots on Garvin. Looks like Hera, crucially, is close enough to provide that infinite focus.
That was the decision there, was if it was in range. And the arc check there, you get to a little cheeky information as to whether Garvin is in range 2 or not. So
cheeky and incredibly impatient, as you are about to find out. But yeah, no, absolutely. Against a list where things are moving or firing at I5 or before Garvin, that is definitely extra information. That's something, Lloyd, that you're really good at, gaining those extra little bits and pieces of information.
Yeah, I think we saw a turn or two back, Kyle passing and obviously measuring range 3 to get information of what shots are coming in, how that token, when it's passed to, whether it needs to arrive as a focus or an evade. Absolutely. Any additional information you can get is always beneficial. And I think Andrew is incredibly good at that. Having watched a few of his games now, it's something he always has a really good awareness of what the board state is.
Absolutely. And Garvin coming through. Plan Garvin kills the list is looking okay at the moment. That's 3 hits and a crit. Onyx Squadron eating most of it, going down to 2 hull, taking a blinded pilot, which although he's bumped this turn, certainly over the coming few turns is not insignificant.
And this is one of those turns where we were talking about having disciplined. I had the choice with the lock with Garvin. And I could have locked yellow, which was a range 2. And I could have locked pink, which was a range 2. But I decided to lock green because he's a range 1 and he was full health. And I did not particularly want to, whether on purpose or accidentally, kill one of the other two and get everyone to lock Garvin here.
Absolutely. I was playing a game against Chris Bankston before this tournament. He also did very well, ended up getting to the cut, although not getting quite as far as either of you two. And my wedge accidentally killed an interceptor in the opening engagement and turned some divided range 2 to 3 fire into my list into a lot of focused range 1 fire, and I promptly lost the game. So I think very, very sensible choice there. Garvin having to weather a bit back here. Another 3 hits, that's very nice. 2 shields off Garvin, 1 above half. In fact, Andrew's entire list currently 1 above half. All looking a little bit precarious, but you are now in the lead, Andrew, 69 to 61, having half that aggressor. Still have the Hera focus. A couple more shots to face this round, I think. Another range 1 here. Oh, crucial from the bumped ship. Did have a blinded anyway, so even if he did have a token, that would not have been modifiable. And we're now down to the more long-range shots, and these are going to find it a little bit more difficult to do damage, although I think we're down to 1 focus for defense. Oh, that's no help.
1 focus on defense on Garvin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I'm still in the mode of X-Wing being fair and wholesome. Yeah, absolutely. Infinite focuses, but no evades, no ability to focus and evade, I think is what I was getting at. Buzz managed to shrug off that last couple of shots.
So here's the thing, too. You can pass the Hera to Kyle, and then he can just hold it with Moldy Crow.
Absolutely.
Even if the shot, if you whiff or you roll good like that, it's a pretty cool interaction as well.
I've got to say, I've been playing a similar list to this a bit over the last few weeks, and I am not as familiar with it as you are yet. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, well, there's no point pressing here. And the rule I'm sort of developing is no, there is always a point. You can always do something horribly broken and beneficial. Just think about it a little bit longer. And yeah, absolutely.
Because Garvin doesn't always have to pass back to Hera.
Yeah.
It's very often that's the choice, but sometimes he can spend Hera's and then slingshot it as an evade token to someone. That's also been pretty clutch sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And this would have been a situation if Garvin had rolled a focus on that last defensive shot. You could have at that point bounced the token from Hera over to Kyle, and then even if Kyle doesn't have a shot, you end up with that saved focus. And we're seeing Kyle here has boosted, not taken an action, and has come out of the turn with 1 more focus than he went into it. And this is looking pretty close at this stage. We've got about 20 minutes left in the game. A slender 8-point lead. As I said earlier, all of your ships 1 above half. And Peter, although a couple of these guys are going to have to cope with gas clouds and not being able to hard turn, you've still got command of the centre of the board. Starting with you, what's your thought at this point? Are you worried about being behind? Are you still kind of quite confident that you can kind of come out of this with the win?
No, at this point, even though I've only lost 1 ship, I am very concerned because I've got Pink, who can't turn around without being stressed. I've got Green, who I think has panicked pilot.
He did. He just took a panics. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to lose a ship very, very soon, and even with disciplined, discipline might not be available for ships. So at this point, I am concerned, especially with Hera and with Kyle, so far away from the rest of my guys, with them effectively kind of facing the wrong direction. At this point, the onus is on me to claw some points back, and I'm not in a good position to do so.
And so, given that concern, which I think you described really nicely, I think that's a really good assessment of the game state. What are your options here? Does everything have to do its best, to chase down Kyle? Do you try and stay over this side of the board and maybe nick some more points off Garvin, or?
Well, I've actually got a difficult target choice. Because I'm aware that all of Andrew's ships are one hit away from half. So even just a couple of lucky shots to get that one damage through would be enough to have a big point swing back in my direction. So really, for me, it's trying to get guns on target, but also trying to ditch the stress if I can.
And Andrew, over to you. Although it looks slender, the lead, and although everything is one off half, Peter's plan there, I think, sounds sensible up until you remember what your list can do. And what he's done well so far is have weight of fire, numerous shots going in on one target, well modded. And the list now is starting to get a bit pulled apart, largely as a result of the kind of crits and things taking stress. And I worry that chasing things down to get one or two plink shots in, as you said at the start of the game, 2 evades the list. You could shoot these things forever with 2 aggressors and they may never take damage. From your point of view, what's the path to victory from here?
Well, I'm up on points, so at this point I feel safe to kind of disengage at least a little bit. My ships can kind of range control him, and this is where I start to realize that Kyle can shoot at range 3 at the turret, and the aggressors can't. So even if they're not great quality shots, I can kind of just keep doing the donut with the aggressors and trading range 3 shots and giving away focus tokens. I'm just trying to regroup a little bit here, but essentially the game plan is, exactly that. His guys are all starting to get a little spread out and are now trying to turn in to shoot me with the dorsals so you can range control them a lot easier. And I have a little more token control with Hera and Kyle that I can take a shot or 2 around and it might not be a big deal, right? I can probably shrug it off pretty all right. So if I kind of just pick away at them and keep the lead up, that's the game plan at this point.
Yeah, it only needs to go wrong once, but given the token passing ability, you can be relatively happy that it's not likely to. So we saw Yellow Onyx Squadron did have a shot there with the primary, but roll blanks. No tokens need to be passed, and now we're down to exactly as you said, Carl getting shots on things that could not shoot him because he has a genuine primary turret.
I definitely got lucky with everything just being above half. But if I can try to keep things at range 3, if he is shooting me at range 3 or obstructed, then at least I'll have the extra dice to try to minimize variance as much as possible. So I can keep everything above half at this point, and theoretically I win, right? Even if I don't do any more damage. Obviously, I want to do some more damage because I don't feel comfortable with an 8-point lead and 3 ships 1 hull away from half, but
absolutely. We see a second focus pass there to Kyle, not being able to spend it on attack, and Kyle for the second round in a row has not taken any focus actions and has gone from 0 to 2 focus in that time. And you're right, you're in an interesting spot, aren't you? You kind of feel like you want more points so that you've got a bit of a buffer, but actually, because all of your ships are worth so much more than all of Peter's, an extra half doesn't help you. An extra half, you're still in the position where if you lose 1 damage on any of your ships, you're behind. So if you're going to go in, you need to kind of get an entire ship's worth of points.
You're exactly right. I need to get a bit of a lead, but I can't really risk anything at this point at all in doing so.
Lloyd, from this position, what do you think Peter's options are? We've got Andrew, at least on that turn, looking like he's running for the hills. Now, we've heard from him that he's going to try and get back in at some point, but very sensibly wants to do it when it's beneficial to him. I'm kind of tempted to say Peter should kind of just group everything back together and take a turn off, but we are running low on time.
Yeah, I was just looking at the clock as you're asking that question, and we're over an hour into the game. I think there's probably 10 or so minutes, maybe even slightly less, left in the game. So you're looking at 2 rounds max. So if you're going to regroup this turn, you need to do it safely, but you need to be trying and set yourself up so that next turn you can get all of the shots that you need. And we've already spoken about the fact that Andrew has the ability to reposition with all of his ships. Now, Kyle is stressed from that boost 2 turns ago, so we'll be slightly more limited in where he can get to. I think the feeling probably for me is that Kyle is going to try and get behind that gas cloud to safety, if not this turn, then next turn. And so you need to be getting a position where you can get arcs in and around that gas cloud to make it a threatening place to be. But it's certainly not an easy position for Peter. Like, as Peter correctly identified a few turns ago, right? From a position that was looking relatively comfortable when he was up on points, knowing the game state, knowing how his list operates, he actually was in the lead at that point, but about to start losing. And knowing that means that you can play accordingly. I think he has done a decent job of keeping a lot of these aggressors engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, we see you turning in here. Now, Pink, if we go back to my idea about K turning a few turns ago, Pink is now way out of the fight, but given that he's only on 2 health, that's maybe not a terrible thing. Blue has done a nice job of getting back involved, and blue, yellow, and brown look like they could put a little bit of heat on the Hawk here, in maybe not in this turn, but next turn. You took focuses that round with them.
Yeah, I was about to say, looking back, I think I made a mistake, and all 3 should have locked the Hawk.
I think I'd agree.
Yeah, because ion missiles at that point. I mean, yes, they're only single modded and only the one from Brown, but that would have potentially got that extra damage through, and would have got me an extra 25 points at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that thing, isn't it? It's with so many defensive modifications. We talked about it right at the start of the game. You kind of need to overwhelm the defense dice, and 2 attack into 3 evade is not going to do it. And in a way that if you'd risk the Iron Torp, if you roll 3 damage there, then you get your half points and can kind of, at this point, disappear off into this top right-hand corner and maybe weather the storm. Easy to say in hindsight, but that might have been the thing. And I think with yellow and blue, they've ended up without shots. It would make them a little bit more threatening for the Hawk this turn, although they do still have them on Hera, and maybe can try and catch Hera on what looks like we're coming into the last turn of the game here. So no further damage done that turn. A couple of long-range shots exchanged. And 1 turn left. This is looking tricky, but doable. The Hawk, a little bit jammed up by Hera. Not got many options of where to go. Looks, you've got to be thinking that it's going to go 3 straightforward, boost around the corner, something of that variety. Garvin probably can't do a relevant amount of damage, or maybe that's a little bit of a risky thing to say. Andrew, at this point, it seems like 2 choices. You either turn in and try and score some more points, or you try and run. What's the kind of correct choice between those 2?
Well, so Kyle is stressed. So essentially, he has the 3 straight, 4 straight, or 3 bank as options here, or I guess the 2 hard to the left. I mean, Hera is going to just hang out with Kyle because she is an evade token for Kyle at this point, or Kyle can be an evade token for her on whoever Peter decides to go in on. And Garvin, I think I'm thinking about sneaking in that 2 hard to the left here, just kind of over the gas cloud that I boosted for. Maybe sniping a range 3 shot into one of these injured guys if they turn in. Hera can potentially get him his focus, and he can potentially lock one. He has a lock on green, but green seems too far away. So just kind of sticking at range 3, trying to avoid as much as I can. The ion missiles are definitely scary, though, on Hera, and something that I still have to be deeply considerate of.
And also, I think it's worth mentioning when you were talking about the options for Kyle there, a lot of the options you mentioned, in fact, maybe all of the options you mentioned, were white maneuvers with a stressed ship. And it's something we haven't spoken about for a few episodes, but it's that knowing when to break the rules, right? Your first couple of games of X-Wing are learning the rules of X-Wing. And then I think the difference between being a mediocre player and getting better than that is knowing when to break the rules. And so having a stressed ship that you've chosen for multiple turns now to not clear that stress sounds to perhaps a new player like a really weird or terrible decision, but is of course completely the right decision, because the thing that's important is keeping Kyle safe. And in the same way that a 2 turn to the right puts him into the corner of a board with nowhere else to go, but on the final turn of the game, that might be the safest place for them. And quite often is, right?
Yeah, many a game I've spent time looking at the clock, wondering whether there's going to be 1 or 2 turns left, because what you don't want to do is too hard him into the corner and realise that there are 2 turns left in the game. But this is the final turn. Andrew has gone for the 3 straight, which looks decent, looks to have put him behind the gas cloud. And Garvin coming in. It's not at much risk. I quite slightly question that decision.
It is risky. I probably shouldn't have done it. I guess I'm assuming here that he wants to shoot Hera because she has the locks, right? And he can shoot her with missiles.
And that's a safe assumption to make. I think it's that mass thing of, are you likely to kill something? Probably not, given that the already hurt ones are far away. And if you don't, you kind of put Garvin at risk without it. But Hera is close enough to give Garvin his infinite focus, so that risk is limited.
I boosted for it, which was also a bit of a questionable decision. But because I made the aggressive too hard with Garvin, I feel like I had to do it with Hera. And I get lucky here with the 3 feint.
Yeah, absolutely. So hit, crit going in. Very nice. This is on to yellow, who is on 3. Gets the extra bonus, but takes all 3. Now, this is where that damage from earlier on comes in. Should have been on 4 health, but thankfully, one of these 2 crits was a direct.
This is also where I realized that discipline goes off here, and I may have goofed.
So even had yellow stayed at the correct 4 health, he would have been dead. And as you say, discipline goes off. But crucially, with that kill, taking a ship that had previously not been half pointed, you can now afford to lose half of one of these ships. So Andrew gets to do some locks, gets to do some barrel rolls, but has to half 2 of your 3 ships.
I barrel rolled there to create space for blue, but also to get brown out of Hyle's arc. But I was also trying to eye whether or not that would make it an unobstructed shot onto Hera.
So he shoots with pink here first, which actually I think is probably the wrong decision.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if Garvin here rolls a focus, it lets me give Hera an evade token. Which is something most people don't think about when they play against this list, right? I mean,
No.
It's a silly interaction.
And why would you think about that?
And I believe I do that here, actually.
Yeah, you do exactly that. And it also means that, had you shot Hera first and she has to use those tokens herself, then maybe you have the range 3 Hail Mary to half Garvin for the game. And you've given the Garvin the ability to use that free focus to give Hera an evade. And it's an easy mistake to make. And one that you need to be really on top of exactly how your opponent's list works, which is very, very difficult, with a list like this that at that time was not a known meta force, but it has given the focus evade. Still needs to roll some paint though. We've got a double modded Ion Torp coming in here from blue. This needs to half, and then brown will need to do something. Ooh, not a bad start. 3 hits. Average dice, unfortunately, because of that evade, will save Hera, but we'll see what happens. Oh, and Hera does saved, but only by having the evade. So that is big. So that is effectively game over at this point. There's no way that one of these ships dies. But fine margins. And then the final shot of the game. This could have been a range 2 into Kyle for all the marbles. But as it is, it's a little bit of a sort of pointless postscript, I suppose. And that's it. No further damage done. And a win by Andrew, who goes on to reach the final. Well played, both of you. Final. I watched a lot of Andrew's games over the weekend, and apart from the final, Peter, this was the closest anyone ran him, I think.
Yeah, this was very, very close. I was pretty sure I was going to lose this game after I lost Benthic, and I was kind of playing on the edge of my seat the entire game, right? I was playing with fire, with everything being 1 away from half.
Yeah, I bet.
So some things worked out for me, but I was pretty sure you had me. So it was a hell of a game.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things, right? It's a list we've seen now a few times, mostly Andrew with you running it. And it's a list that has consistently done well. How much of that would you say is that the list can do so much, because it clearly can. But if a lot of your games are very close, and having watched now quite a few of your games, I think you fly it consistently very, very well. It doesn't feel like the list is problematically powerful. It feels like the list is powerful, but there are a lot of powerful lists in the game.
I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I've done well with it. I don't want to. I don't want to sound. Yeah, I don't know. I think the list is very good. I don't think it's as straightforward to fly as a lot of people think. There's a lot of incredibly complicated interactions, and like it really hinges on Benthic and Kyle and their positioning, and you really have to be aware of where they are at all times and where they're moving into, right? Because Benthic typically has to move and get actions, and things have to move into where Benthic is. And I won't chalk it up. Definitely a couple games over the 2 weekends, both Firecast and Cala. I definitely won on a bit of shock and awe treatment as well. Like I stole a couple games or won a couple games harder than I probably should have, just on people not really realizing what the list does, and kind of just just fumbling into it. So
Absolutely, I think it's definitely one of those lists that, as you say, has caught people out. Probably will continue to catch some people out, but it's definitely the kind of list where a lot of people will pick it up thinking it's easy and find out the hard way that it really isn't.
well, yeah, they see it and just Rebel Beef. I'll just one straight and fly right at things and die. And why did I lose? I have all the tokens. It's not as easy as it sounds.
No, absolutely, yeah. And as I say, I feel like watching your games, you are consistently making sensible and, importantly, calm decisions. It feels like you're always aware of all of the things that Hera can do and how to maximize that ship, and also to keep her safe at the same time. In most of your games, there's never tends to be more than one round or so where she's taking fire, and on those rounds that she tends to be sitting on a token stack and at range quite often as well. So yeah, I think you've done an excellent job of taking a list or devising a list that is very strong and then really flying the hell out of it, frankly.
I think it's a very patient list as well. And I think that a lot of people get hung up on that. Like, I know there's a lot of games and there's points in games where I get overly aggressive with it, but you also have to be things like the too hard with Benthic, which is when I too harded in front of all his ships, ended up being the wrong call. But you have to do things like that a lot consistently because you have to play for the next turn.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very patient list. You can't just be guns a-blazing every turn, right? Hera is typically running away and trying to stay out of the fight so she can support everybody. And you try to make the most of the shots that you can get in that round kind of situations, right?
We didn't get to talk as much about Benthic as I'd have liked because I think he was taken off the board a bit sooner than expected. Peter, from your side, playing against Benthic, a ship that's moving before you that has the potential to block, how aware are you of the sort of blocking positions Benthic can get to? And I suppose specifically the red or even the white stop with Benthic, because so often with a medium base or larger ship that's moving before you, you know that you can safely move into that spot and it'll be a place that you can get to and get actions. But obviously Benthic changes that with his white or red stop with Leia.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern and a consideration. U-Wings with Leia just have such good board control. And the thing that my list does is again that board control, but you can't have board control if you can't be in the right place.
Absolutely.
Also, if the swarm gets broken up too early, then that can completely negate it. And as I said earlier, I don't want to be having to do K turns to try and get back into the right position, because ultimately you know that it'll be the turn that you K turn as the turn that discipline trigger goes off.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think though Andrew's list is now perhaps a bit more well known, it's two really interesting and creative lists that cause a lot of problems for their opponent when flown as well as we've seen today.
I think the aggressor is a very good chassis for that disciplined upgrade. Unless you end up with panic pilot or anything like that, or damaged engine, then you can basically avoid stress a lot easier than a lot of other ships because of that turret and because of the amount of turrets as well.
Yeah, so I mean there are no good crits, but I feel like you got to see all four of the worst ones for you in this game today.
They're like Pokemon, got to catch them all.
And I think that leaves it to me to sum it up. I think, as you guys have said, for me, it was 2 really good lists, 2 lists that have been built on the principle of taking things that are good and efficient. But more than that, 2 players who are able to absolutely maximize those. I couldn't agree more with, I think, Lloyd that said it. A lot of people will either of these lists, and a lot of people will not do as good. They are strong lists for sure. They are forgiving lists for sure. But if you want to get to the top cuts, major events using them, you need to practice and really hone your skill. And if you don't want to take them, if you think they're the worst thing in the world, what you need to do to beat them is play against them and understand what they can do. Both of these lists have weaknesses. We talked about it with the aggressors, with their lack of range 3 out of that side arc, and with the rebel list, with its sort of relatively lumbering, slow-moving ships, only 3 big guns. Both of them have weaknesses that can be exploited, but you're not going to be able to unless you practice. I think that is a decent place to end the episode. So thank you ever so much for coming on, guys. Excellent game, really genuinely excellent game to talk about.
And this was one of my favorite games from the weekend, actually, to be honest.
Congratulations, Andrew, for your Cala Galaxies win, and congratulations, Peter, for your win in the Tin Squadron Cup. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Cheers.